welcome to the Elevate EHS Podcast, Nicole. I appreciate your time today. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about your career, and we can go from there. How's that?
Sure. Great. Thanks for having me. I'm Nicole Ivers. I am the Global Head of Health, Safety, and Environment for Brookfield Properties. I specifically oversee our logistics division, so large industrial warehousing and distribution center type buildings. I have, through hazardous waste to general contracting. I worked in the Middle East for many years, overseeing construction for the FIFA World Cup. And now I have the pleasure of working for the owner.
How did your experience in the Middle East shape your approach to safety, particularly in moving away from any traditional safety models?
Yeah, that's a good point, because I came into safety through the industrial hygiene route. So traditional safety was not my ultimate goal or what I thought I would be doing at this point in my career, but it's not saying no to any kind of offer, like going to the Middle East is how I really expanded my career. So I was working for a general contractor doing industrial hygiene, got asked to start doing safety as well. And so I was trained, like many of us, if not all of us, with that very compliance-based approach. You do your audits, you do your checklist, you take pictures of those people that are doing something wrong, and you run back and make your report out. There was really, looking back, there's really no reason for anybody to like me or trust me on those job sites. So before I knew it, I got an offer to go to the Middle East and Qatar specifically and work on some pretty big jobs. And I got over there and started doing my traditional way of safety and realized that some of my projects had 35,000 people on them working 24/7. There was no way that we could control the behavior of every single person working on that job site. Not to mention that how many different languages we spoke, different skill levels. A lot of the labor was unskilled, had never even been on a construction site before. So it was clear that we had to do something different. And one of the examples I use is that we had a number of trucks that were falling off of these ramps going up to large stockpiles. So these big tipper trucks were driving up and down, dumping soil, coming back down. And so these soil ramps got steeper and steeper, and we started having trucks fall off of them. The traditional solution would have been, how do we train every single one of those workers? How do we assess that they know how to drive up a ramp? What are the qualifications we're going to define? That's impossible for thousands of different truck drivers with different trucks, different skill levels. So the obvious solution was, how can we make our ramp safer so that trucks don't fall off of it? And that was really one of the first areas that we started targeting with this kind of approach. Another interesting thing is that we had very few ladders in the Middle East. And that's still a touchy area here in the US is, don't take away my ladders. Don't think I ever climbed a ladder when I was in the Middle East. And now coming back to the US, I climb ladders more often than I would like to.
Instead of fixing the drivers, we fix the system. So let's talk about that, because there's a lot of pushback now, especially in construction, to saying, hey, if I can't blame the employee or hold them accountable, then I'll let them. I'm basically going to put my hands up and say, you can run roughshod over my program. I'd really like to talk about that and dig into that. And I want to hear your approach to how to navigate that, how to solve for it, or how to view it differently so that it's not a point of contention.
Yeah, well, I'm going to ruffle some feathers. I am probably the most anti-disciplined safety professional on the planet. In all my years of investigating incidents and learning from the things that don't go as planned, I don't feel that I have ever seen an incident or a circumstance where that person did something so intentionally and deliberate that they needed to be disciplined, nor would that discipline have prevented something like that happening again. There are always just issues at play that basically set that person up. What happens? There is definitely some contention there, because we talk about HOP, we talk about anti-blame, but one of the things that I am always asked is, yes, but there still has to be a just culture. How do we appropriately use discipline? And my response would be, I don't think it is appropriate to use discipline for making a mistake, a safety-related mistake. Now, there are times for discipline, theft or assault or violence of some sort, or maybe it's a job performance issue. That's for HR to address. That's not the role of the safety professional to decide how to discipline somebody for making a mistake. And I feel like the people that ask me that are, okay, here's the feather ruffling part. They are still looking for that path to get to blame and discipline. They are asking, yes, okay, I won't blame, but if I need to, how do I do it? What is that flow to get to discipline? And that's normal because that is human nature. We all know that in our minds, we don't want to be blamed. And it feels better to know that there's somebody else to blame. Makes us feel like we fixed something and solved something.
I think you just nailed it right there, Nicole, right? It's the blame, shame, retrain, which is the model most people go through for incident management. It's easy to wrap things up with a bow and close out that incident report within 24 hours. If you can blame, shame, and then say, hey, we'll retrain that employee or fire the employee. We feel like as management, we did what we needed to do. We pat ourselves on the back because we put a corrective action into place, but it didn't really solve for the issue, right? So if you take that employee out and put a brand new employee in the same situation, won't they do the same thing?
And that is the litmus test. For example, if you have a guy that doesn't wear safety glasses or isn't wearing their safety glasses,
Sure.
You send them home for the day. Is that problem resolved? Or is he going to show up the next day with the same scratched up, uncomfortable safety glasses
Sure.
that fog up or aren't prescription or don't have readers so that he can't do his job? Your problem is still there.
No, perfect. Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit, especially I'm interested because you're on the owner side and usually I'm on the GC side. What role do the owners play in influence safety, especially when the traditional contractor pre-qualifications promote or espouse incident rates predominantly? So when I go to fill out my contractor pre-qualification, whether I'm the GC or a sub, the first thing you're going to ask me is, have you heard anybody lately? So I have to focus on those high frequency, low severity items. I have to keep my incident rates down. I have to focus on incident rates because owners are telling me if I'm high, I won't get the job, right? And if I have my focus on high frequency, low severity, how can I shift and put more onus on that serious injury fatality from those low frequency, high severity potentials? Tell me how you balance that, or are you factoring that into your pre-qualifications within your organization when you hire subs?
Yes. What I would say is that safety is so important at the ownership level, whether
Sure.
all owners are there yet or not. I'd say probably there's varying levels of engagement on safety.
Sure.
I think a lot of owners just don't typically have safety professionals in-house to understand that part of the job. They focus on the budget and the schedule.
Sure.
But we as owners have so much influence. If we focus on the right things, we will get different results.
Okay.
So we focus on safety as much as we do schedule and budget, and making sure that the job is bid properly with what we're asking for, we're going to get a better result throughout the project, both safety and quality.
Oh, absolutely.
So we have a minimum health and safety standard, which is not necessarily a repeat of OSHA. That's compliance. That's already written. I shouldn't have to repeat that. But it's really talking more about how to plan for the high risk activities, getting everybody into the room at different stages to walk through those high risk activities instead of just one person doing a risk assessment in a vacuum.
Oh, yes.
We get the GC erectors, the crane operators, we get all of them in the same room to talk through that process and figure out where the greater risk is. There's multiple ways to do things. And if we can identify that ahead of time of where we have options.
Sure.
And this might be a little bit faster, but we could also do it this way, might not impact that much. And it's going to be a lot of risk reduction. But those are the things that we talk through. Again, if we can plan out that work well in advance, excavations is another one that I talk to contractors a lot about, because I want them to make sure that they are bidding and getting contractors that have bid the work properly. So if there is a need for shoring or trench boxes, I want to have that discussion well in advance because we all know what will happen. We hire a GC, they hire a sub, that sub hires another sub. These guys show up on the job, assuming that they can slope, and there isn't room. So they're going to slope to the room that they have.
Right.
And
100%.
then I show up and say, why don't we have trench boxes? And they tell me we didn't budget for that. So I'm trying to get way ahead of that because that is a hot principle. This is predictable, right? We see it.
Yes.
So if I can have that discussion well in advance, we already know if we have the room to slope. We already know whether or not we will need trench boxes. And then I know that is recognized and bid throughout the rest of the project. That's the approach from the owner side that I'm using to help influence the performance in the field. We also look at the design very closely. So we have the opportunity to change the design of our building to make it safer, not only for construction, but also for our tenants' use. For example, fixed ladders, they're allowed by OSHA, of course.
Sure.
But are they the safest way to access 40 feet up to a roof? No, of course not. So we've changed our design to create a stair tower access, which is much safer for the people that use our building. And we're also looking at where we can increase the height of our parapets.
Oh, absolutely. That was always a fight. It was interesting in the field, right? We'd be doing parapets, right? We'd have guardrails up. And then when we poured, right, the guardrails would be too low. So we'd have an issue. And then when we left, we took our guardrails with us. So now you're leaving a building with low parapets for the owner when they have to go up and do roof maintenance. So it never made much sense to me. Absolutely. I love it.
I am trying to bridge that gap. But getting back to your original question, which was how do we pre-qualify or evaluate the performance of a contractor? So yes, we ask for that kind of information. We do ask for incident rate. I also ask for SIF rates.
Oh, interesting.
So I don't get a lot of content there, but it's part of the discussion. I ask for citation history because I can cross-check that on the OSHA website.
Certainly.
So this just gives us an opportunity to discuss. If I see an incident rate that is abnormally high, it gives me an opportunity to talk with the contractor and understand what's going on. Where are they at with their program? And sometimes they will come back to me and say, yes, we did have incidents at this point, and this is what we've done to change that, and this is how we're improving our program. And then I might get other answers, which is, yes, of course our EMR is high. We have had a lot of injuries. Or to fix that, we've been very focused on preventing people from getting medical care.
Yeah.
Some of them are not going to be the answers that I want, but that tells me a lot more than anything that they can.
Oh, absolutely. I want to back up and clarify. You asked for the SIF rates. I assume that's injuries that have had a threshold for serious impact or significant injury, fatality, life impacting. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, and that is a gray area as far as defining what a SIF incident is.
That was my next question to you is, are you asking for the actuals or are you asking for the SIF potentials as well?
Yes, it's more of a SIF potential.
Excellent. So I love it.
To understand how frequently are you having a high potential incident.
I love it. Perfect.
Maybe it didn't hurt anybody, but that helps me to understand. Also, how are they learning from incidents? If they do have a recognition of what potential is.
I love it. This has been a fantastic conversation. I love it. But let's talk about, you're a very engaged, and to me, it's not what we typically see from an owner. What about the owners out there that aren't as, let's say, proactive as you and your organization? What would you say to a GC who doesn't have that level of engagement to do the planning ahead? What can they do to get better and protect themselves if you don't have it as engaged an owner who is aware of the ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure kind of thing? What can they do and where can they go to start to improve their outlook and their, let's say, pre-planning efforts?
First of all, I would say don't be afraid to push back on the owner. I think that
Excellent.
a lot of GCs are afraid to say anything to the owners. I'm going to need this building a month earlier than I told you. A lot of GCs will just say, okay, we don't know how we'll do it, but we'll get it done. And then that message just gets filtered down to the guys that are doing the work. And what that means to them is work longer hours and faster. And all the safety is out the window.
Oh, absolutely. You have contractors working on top of contractors where you're introducing risks that weren't even there before because now you're just shorting the schedule. So
or you have sequencing that can't be sped up. You know, you can only dry concrete so fast. So there are situations where you just it's not physically possible to go any faster. We know that is going to be a prime time for incidents to occur.
Absolutely.
So
perfect.
I would say that contractors need to educate the owners in some cases and help them to understand why they can't make up time or what this cost reduction could mean for certain resources or for certain equipment that they need on the site. If they were to turn around and say, okay, if you want me to cut this budget, that means I'm going to lose the stair tower. We're not losing my stair tower. So that allows us to have a conversation to understand where that money is coming from. And same thing like when an owner comes onto a job site and they're not wearing the appropriate PPE or clothing. Push back on that owner. We don't want them to get hurt either, but sometimes they just don't understand what the expectation is or how important it is to specifically show that on the site. It's very dangerous.
Oh, absolutely. It's certainly going to influence the culture when you see that, right?
Yes.
Absolutely.
The other part of that would be that your safety professionals and your team, they have to educate themselves. So this is one of the biggest challenges, I think, in our safety profession right now is how do we convert from that old way that we have been taught and at least incorporate how and start adding opportunities, even if you don't just go a 180 to, okay, everything compliance is out the window, we're now only going to focus on this. You know, look for opportunities to bring in certain hot type principles, like where can we reduce ladders? We're not going to get rid of all the ladders, but where is our highest risk? Maybe we focus on those particular areas and bring in stair towers.
Sure.
So those are hot principles. Where are people likely to take shortcuts? Where are we seeing the most non-compliances? And maybe that's an area that we focus on. So you don't have to do everything all at once. Look for where you get the biggest bang for your buck. But safety professionals need to be able to educate their employers in the right way to focus on the right method. A lot of us just don't do continuing education the way we should or seek it out, which is a great segue into the Georgia Safety Conference or any other safety related conference that you have access to.
Let's talk about the Georgia Safety Conference. Yeah. That's a good segue, Nicole.
So the Georgia Safety Conference, we're in our 29th year.
Wow.
I'm in my last year as the president of that organization, and it's held every single year in Savannah, Georgia. A very affordable conference to get your CEUs, but really just really good education. And we try to make it very relevant to the things affecting our discipline. This year, our biggest focuses are going to be on HOP and also mental health. Two of, I think, the most important topics to us right now. You can get completely caught up on HOP from introduction to actually how to implement it and do learning teams. You can get that from this conference. We have a lot of speakers talking on mental health and how to really bring that into the field of safety. Because the reality is we have a lot more people that are being hurt through stress and medical conditions and substance abuse than we have of people being hurt or killed on the job.
Oh, that's interesting. Especially we tend to focus on acute injuries, right?
Yeah.
And we tend to ignore either long-term illnesses, right? And mental health in that suffering is a big piece of that, right? So when we espouse this zero harm, which I'm not a huge fan of, and we take that into account, very disingenuous. Perfect. Georgia Safety Conference. We'll put it, when we do the podcast, we'll put the link out. But if you have any information, do you have the website or where they can go to get information?
Yeah, so you find us on LinkedIn is probably the best place to get all of your
Perfect.
updates. So it's under the Georgia Safety Conference. And we also have our featured keynote speaker this year is Todd Conklin.
Excellent.
If you can't get on board with HOP after hearing Todd
Absolutely.
I don't know what to tell you.
He's a hop guru for sure. Fantastic. Yeah. Nicole, such a pleasure. So many great insights. I appreciate you for sharing. Do you have any advice you want to give the listeners working in safety roles or in construction?
I think the most important thing that I can come back and reiterate is blame. I think that blame is the biggest obstacle to everything else in our field. If we continue to blame people for making mistakes, especially when they did not intend to make them in the first place, we're never going to get trust and transparency within our workforce, on our job sites, which prevents us from truly recognizing the risks associated with the work. So I think that blame and getting rid of the discipline for making mistakes is the first step. And if we can get on board with that, everything else is going to be a lot easier.
Sure, absolutely. A fundamental shift from how do you fix the worker to how do you fix the system to support that human error is a huge path forward, I think, for all safety professionals. Nicole, thank you so much for your time and your insight and your wisdom and sharing some tremendous nuggets from your illustrious career. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gary.